Hello, everyone, and everyone who's going to be tuning in the future. Once again, you are tuning into Hard Targets, open source intel by the people, for the people, news from a multipolar world. This is Teray. I'm going to try to keep it short today. Obviously, the big things to talk about are things that already happened or stuff we already knew, namely the Nord Stream pipeline being confirmed, that being the major story today. I mean, that we already knew. Of course, we knew that it was confirmed that America was behind that act of industrial terrorism. But now we have American journalists for the first time confirming the culprit. And also, I want to talk a little bit about Biden's State of the Union address. I would have covered it live yesterday, but now someone wants to fund my Wi-Fi setup. I don't have the capacity, so we're going to talk about what the State of the Union address means for the country as a whole and where we are in terms of political divisions. Because I did notice two big ones, so it's worth talking about. But yeah, as you can see from the title of the video, it is confirmed. America took out the Nord Stream pipeline. And American journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story today on his Substack, breaking down everything that went into the covert operation to sabotage the German pipeline of cheap Russian gas. Namely, how a Navy facility in the panhandle of Florida was commissioned by the Biden administration and a few other Biden cronies, such as Antony Blinken, to corral a number of members of the Navy, diving specialists and explosive specialists, to be able to go into the Baltic Sea under cover of Navy exercises and plant explosives on the Nord Stream pipeline, which was at the time an unfinished or an unoperational pipeline to send liquid natural gas from Russia to Germany, Russia being the major supplier of natural gas to Germany, keeping their fuel supplies for their manufacturing industry cheap. With the explosion of that pipeline, and just rehashing some details that, if you didn't already know, are important context for the implications of America being behind this attack. Germany getting most of its cheap fuels from Russia after the start of the special military operation in Ukraine, under force of NATO and the United States, started to divest its natural gas supply from Russia, up to and including straight up just sanctioning oil supplies that were keeping its economy afloat. This not being enough for the Biden administration, Biden, who on camera said he was going to, quote unquote, handle the Nord Stream pipeline should it become operational, set up a number of operations to make sure that the pipeline just straight up was blown up. Germany was going to move ahead with its construction. This being unacceptable to Biden's green fascist agenda to supply all of Europe with American natural gas, made sure to send covert Navy specialists to plant explosives. Oh, I got one person in the chat. I bet you're with the U.S. military trying to take me out now that we know that Biden is behind the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. Hi, FBI. How you doing today? Thank you for tuning in. This is Teray with Hard Targets. But yeah, the implications of America being behind this act of industrial terrorism, America already set to benefit from the redistribution of supply lines around the world thanks to the Ukraine war. Germany is now just completely subservient to American supplies of petroleum, natural gas, now that not only are sanctions making cheap Russian energy unavailable to the German economy, American energy is the only option left to keep. The German economy is not coming back. However, German consumerist tendencies to continue sucking up American liquid natural gas is just now a permanent feature of German manufacturing. This has only benefited America. Russia did not benefit from the explosion of the Nord Stream pipeline. Germany certainly didn't benefit. They still have to pay out that contract. They are still obligated to pay out that contract, even though the pipeline exploded. So Germany certainly doesn't benefit. Oil monopolists and liquid natural gas monopolists in the United States stand to benefit immensely from this act of industrial terrorism. And the fact that Germany had not done any sort of investigation, serious investigation, when it was obvious who was behind these attacks, and the fact it was an American who had to come out and say, yo, the Biden administration is responsible for this. I'm very curious for what Germany's response, if any response, what is going to be for the fact that they just crippled a major artery of their manufacturing. Germany is the largest economy in the EU, and the fact that their manufacturing industry has one at a time, just major blows, one after the other, to deindustrialize Germany means that this puts lives at risk. This means people's livelihoods is gone up in smoke. This means that, all over Europe, people have been at risk of freezing to death for the sake of making sure that American liquid natural gas monopolists could triple their profits. So this has had serious consequences for the people of Europe. So whether or not Germany will have a response remains to be seen. The CIA has, at this point, come out and said that they've responded. The CIA has responded to this article saying, "Oh, it's utter nonsense. This is falsehoods. We would never do this." Not giving any details as to why this is false. Just we have to take the CIA's word for it, as they've always told us to take their word for it after every act of industrial and literal terrorism that they've enacted on the world. So if anything happens to award-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, remember, Seymour Hersh did not kill himself. But yeah, now that we have some people in the stream, let's make some shameless plugs. Follow me on Telegram at Hard Targets Intel. You can also follow my personal Twitter at IronSunUSA. It's more of a personal account, though I do make sure to share all of this apocalyptic news going on, because it's always good to keep the discussion going so that the real forces of misinformation, the American mainstream media, can't get a hold on the American mind. What are you saying in the comments? Hi, hey, Ron Swanson Stalinist. Good to see you in the chat. Yeah, lots of medical equipment manufacturing in Germany. Yeah, German industry is just the center of the European economy that everything else revolves around. Car manufacturing, medical equipment, chemical processing. It's like with the deindustrialization of Germany means that the rest of Europe just does not stand a chance in terms of keeping the connected European Union economy afloat. Without manufacturing, they have to rely solely on outside powers. I had talked about this, or I wanted to talk about this in other streams, how they're shifting manufacturing of semiconductors away from China to Morocco, to the just to the south of Europe and to the north part of Africa. So that's just another. I guess Morocco, you could say, is like Europe's Mexico at this point. Just the exporting of manufacturing outside of the European Union is becoming this vicious cycle that is only being reinforced by American sabotage. This is intentional. Why this is intentional, I'm going to get to with these. Let's talk about Biden's State of the Union address, because it was. If you didn't see it, you might have watched Infrared, watching it live. I was watching it live with Nick Fuentes' America First stream, and it was boring, as anything regarding Joe Biden is pretty boring. But there are very telling political implications for that speech. regards splits in the American two-party system and within the two parties themselves. I do believe that the major split between Republicans and Democrats is the split between oil power and lithium power. The Biden administration being very clearly on team lithium power, to the point of causing the European Union, causing Sri Lanka, causing all of these countries to commit economic suicide for the sake of getting their claws in the supply chains necessary to make electric vehicles and lithium batteries. And then you have the oil power, the Republican power being just the monopoly on commodities, specifically petroleum, which is more traditionally Republican. I believe that is the major split between the ruling class right now, is between those two forms of energy production. And this, one of the most blatant acts of terrorism from the United States in a while, I think proves that point, that Biden, at the behest of lithium power, of the ruling class that represents lithium power and this green fascist future of deindustrialization, of environmental suicide, just putting human lives at risk for the sake of worshiping Mother Nature and the sun god. Biden acting so explicitly in those interests, up to the point of committing just blatant industrial sabotage of a foreign nation, an act of war, basically, straight up. This is an act of war. Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. Thank you for putting that in the comments, Ron Swanson, Stalinist. I have that clip pulled up. I'm going to play it. Wi-Fi permitting, I'm going to play it. But that is, I want to play that clip. Let's play it right now, actually. I mean, we might as well get into that part of the discussion. And then I'll talk about the implications of it. So, let me share my screen here. There we go. So, yeah, there were. And this is something that's remarkable that I've.
Well, for at least another decade, to production.
All right. So let me know if it's a bit laggy.
To production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells, all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. And that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding the CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the.
So yeah, that's the clip. I hope it wasn't too laggy, but yeah, that. So I'm gonna pull up Ron Swanson and Stalinist comments again. That we will need oil for at least another 10 years. This statement is remarkable for a number of reasons. The most the most obvious reason, is that it is hilarious. People just in an uproar, just in the audience itself, of people in Congress heckling the president of the United States over that comment. I have never seen that before in a State of the Union address. I don't think I've ever seen that before in a presidential speech. Just members of Congress heckling the president. If you in recent memory have seen something like that, let me know. I'm 30 years old. I don't remember that happening in my adult life. So that in and of itself is remarkable, just how ridiculous that statement is. And yeah, it's just you and me in the comments, Ron Swanson style, and this queen fascism speeding up its timeline. Yeah, I think that split between the ruling class, between lithium power and petroleum power, by necessity is escalating because they realize they don't have a timeline of a decade to duke it out peacefully. Their peaceful competitions of power are no longer sufficient. With Biden trying to supplant all uh, global production under this green fascism, under deindustrialization, to the point where like people's lives are just completely destroyed. People actually die. He's willing to do that to countries and continents all over the world. He's willing to help Ukraine turn. He's willing to turn Ukraine into the next Israel, destabilizing the entire European continent to sublate all energy production under this climate insanity. Um, yeah, I've never seen that before. But the statement, if you like break it down and if you wonder why people in the audience were heckling Biden, if you wonder why that statement is funny, if you know anything about oil production, a decade might seem like a long time. Put yourself in the shoes of one of these oil monopolists in Texas. Um, you want to sell liquid natural gas to the European continent. You want to produce oil and sell it, and then once supplies are established under your production, you you are now making money. That process takes at least 7 years, 8 years. The process of getting the rights to land, of looking for oil deposits, of actually building the factories that are going to extract and process these resources, this petroleum, let alone finding a market, enough markets to sell all of your product. The timeline of start to finish, the finish line being in profit, is 5 to 8 years. 5 to 8 years. I learned that timeline specifically last week from just a deep state spook named what's his name? Ben Zion. It's funny that his last name is Zion, but yeah. If I'm not gonna put his YouTube in the comments. I don't want NAFO spooks to get more attention. But yeah, he was talking to this room full of Texas oil tycoons, saying like what the Ukraine war meant for their job prospects, and he was like very cynically excited for them. Like people who run Washington think tanks are very excited for the prospects of both lithium production and oil production. Like both sections of the ruling class who are at war with each other right now, increasingly going to literal war if this Nord Stream pipeline is any indication. Yeah, like this, like the disruption of supply chains through the COVID crisis, and now even further through the Ukraine war, means that oil producers in the United States have an opportunity to be selling their own product. Making money directly from oil that's underneath American soil. But that process does take 5 to 8 years, according to Ben Zion, if I do get his name right. I hope I don't. Zero respect for deep state spooks. But yeah, so 8 years just to be in profit. And Biden says that, oh, we have at least another decade to transition out of petroleum. So you're giving the oil monopolists 2 years to see a return on their investment. Like environmental impact aside, that like 2 years for oil producers to see a return on investment, regardless if you're a capitalist producer or a socialist producer, or if you're Russia. That is an insane prospect. 2 years of a return on your investment. just working in the red, just in debt, so that so that the Biden administration can push out this unpopular and broken technology. And if you understand the implications, you do. I mean, if you aren't weeping um, at the thought of being forced to drive one of these busted ass electric cars, then it is funny that how out of touch he is with that process. So yeah, like Swanson Stalinist is saying, the green fascism is speeding up its timeline. It's not going to be 10 years. They're not like, oh yeah, well, petroleum gets another 10 years before he phase it out. No, do you think he's going to wait 10 years and then it's going to be like this clean switch? The Nord Stream pipeline explosion is part of an ongoing strategy to speed up the full control of lithium power for the entire global supply of energy. This act of sabotage is one in a long line. It's not going to stop here. I mean, we can consider the IMF's collapse of Sri Lanka to be a similar act of not industrial terrorism but legal terrorism, holding their entire economy hostage to get rid of synthetic fertilizer, which they need to grow food to live. And that being another example of green fascism to further this agenda of reducing carbon, which is code for reducing you or the carbon they want to reduce. Both of those acts of terrorism happened very close to each other, and that's going to accelerate. You can. I mean, I made a video about this, which I encourage you to watch. How Cop City in Atlanta and the Antifa riots that happened in Atlanta are connected to this green fascist agenda. Like the Antifa terrorists who are hiding out in the woods of Atlanta to protest Cop City. Don't tear down Atlanta forests. Also, we're going to burn down black neighborhoods in support of the environment. You think that is not connected to the climate crackdowns happening in Europe? At the same time that Germany is cracking down on climate protests and Britain is cracking down on climate protests, now Joe Biden is sending in the National Guard, 1,000 National Guard troops to occupy the city of Atlanta after these Antifa psychos are starting this out of nowhere, starting this climate protest. And stop Cop City, stop. No, this is a clear strategy of speeding up the timeline, of forcing the National Guard, of centralizing executive authority under military control to force you to eat the bugs, to force you to drive the crappy electric cars, to force you into this insanity. This is all part of a deliberate strategy. Not that I support oil monopolists in Texas going to war with all of these countries in the Middle East to steal oil from Syria, to steal oil from Iraq. We are still occupying Syria and stealing their oil and wheat. I don't support that either. But if we are producing oil in American territory, why isn't that supply going to Americans? Why isn't their first concern supplying Americans with cheap fuel instead of selling it to Europe at a premium, driving up inflation here in the United States so they can continue to make profits? I don't support that either. I support full control of our own supply, like people's control, people's dictatorship, an American citizen's dictatorship over the resources that are under our feet. That is what I support. But these two factions of the ruling class, lithium power, petroleum power, are going to be going head to head. This is the last point I wanted to make today, because I've been following a lot of what's going on with Mexico, specifically, U.S. involvement in Mexico and just economic development that's been happening in in the country. And if you look at the trend in terms of if you think of the ruling class as split between these two factions, lithium power and petroleum power, uh, the U.S. Mexico border is the site of a lot of conflicts that are to come between the ruling class, between lithium and petroleum, and between Zionism and protectionism, more specifically. To speak of the first one, to continue on this trend of lithium versus petroleum, yeah, I mean, if the Ukraine war has benefited Texas liquid natural gas tycoons who expect to be speeding up processing, I mean, the population of the Texas region is going to explode in the next few years because as the economy collapses, anywhere that can promise good jobs, anywhere that can promise you can make enough to feed your family is going to explode in population. And energy jobs historically have been pretty good, even just by themselves in terms of like supporting you and your family. So in desperate times, like that trend is only going to balloon even further of people just flocking to the region to be able to secure energy jobs, uh, which is important because I'm following a couple Telegram groups, but I did share these links on my Telegram, so I do encourage you to follow to see what I'm talking about here. Uh, One Telegram group talking about how China is taking over Latin America and betting on Brazil as the next manufacturing hub to counter the resurgence of India. And China is the number two trading partner in South America behind the United States overall, just from Mexico down to the tip of Argentina. Just it's China all the way down as the number two trading partner, where if not the number one trading partner, with the United States in second place. Looking at places like Nicaragua. Um, so the trend, part of the trend here, like in general, China's trade with Latin American countries, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Argentina, has grown by 26 times to 310 billion, making it second only to the U.S. By 2035, China is expected to be the region's biggest trading partner. So China already having a control of supply lines in general, just they get 36% of their food from South America, and 60% of the world's lithium is in Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, in the lithium triangle, in copper in Chile, like very essential supply of raw goods, not to mention trade of goods in general is like only growing with the rise of Chinese dominance and the weighting of American dominance. And then Mexico, to bring it full circle here, these bullet points bring attention to the fact that Beijing has recently invested $4.5 billion in lithium production in Mexico and the so-called lithium triangle. $4.5 billion of investment, much of which is going to Mexico. So again, this lithium production, and Mexico also being a major exporter of petroleum. It used to be number three. We traded with the they traded with the United States of petroleum. It's gone down, I think, to either like number 8 or number 11 in terms of trade. But Mexico is a major petroleum producer, and if Texas, the Mexican neighbor, being set to grow exponentially its petroleum and petroleum product production, this means that the Mexico region, the Texas-Mexico region, is a site of a major clash between lithium and petroleum, which is increasingly not a peaceful clash. It's a clash that, at least in terms of the American ruling class, cannot be resolved through a peaceful transfer of power. The growth of green energy supply lines and of American petroleum products is coming to a head. And I do believe that the Mexican region, the Mexican Texas region, is going to see that conflict play out as it's already playing out in terms of um, illegal immigration. I mean, that's part of it. I mean, with the American economy as down the toilet as it is, and these industries needing a supply of labor, of cheap labor, that's where they're getting it. Then we've always known this. However, and this is what I want to connect with in terms of the other major divide in regards to the State of the Union address. So if lithium power, petroleum power, the major divide between Democrats and Republicans, between one sector of the ruling class and the other sector of the ruling class. I believe that Zionism in general is the division between the parties themselves. We see both Democrats and Republicans on the extreme wings of either party. We're seeing a pushback against the centrist policy of just blindly supporting Zionist tendencies. And not just Zionist tendencies in Israel, but Zionist policies in Ukraine as well. Zelensky is saying out loud that he wants Ukraine to be the next Israel, to be the next site of Zionization, of causing conflict in order to destabilize a region, of designating a country as the site of permanent, irresolvable conflict in Israel, and the permanent, irresolvable conflict between Israeli colonization and Palestinian liberation, this irreconcilable conflict that is the site of just apartheid, genocide, whatever you want to call it, Israel. This is a permanent shit show because of Zionism. Ukraine being the next project of Zionization. And the US-Mexico border, if we broaden this definition of Zionism, of creating a state of permanent conflict to destabilize a region, to designate like this, to sanctify this permanent conflict, and purge an entire population for the sake of creating a permanent regional conflict. The US-Mexico border is another site of Zionization, of this fleeing, millions and millions of people fleeing regional violence that was caused by Joe Biden, specifically Honduras, Guatemala, Haiti, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. I mean, the big four people come the past few months of population coming over the border being from Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, 4 countries devastated by U.S. imperialism, sanctions, sometimes actual like invasion attempts. But the Zionization of Central America and South America overall, in many of these countries, just turning those countries themselves, but also the U.S.-Mexico border, to this permanent state of conflict that we're seeing the fringes of both parties speak out against now, of this broad process of Zionization of the world. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz on the Republican side calling for Kevin McCarthy to ensure to stop funding for the Ukraine war, and you have AOC Ilhan Omar on the other side, being at least nominally critical of Israel, of Ukraine and Israel. Well, more so Israel than UKIP. I mean, both of those frauds support Ukraine and sending money to Ukraine. But with that recent scandal of Ilhan Omar being kicked from the Committee of Foreign Affairs, there is criticism from both extreme wings of both parties against the general process of Zionism, of Zionization of Israel, of Ukraine, and increasingly of the U.S.-Mexico border, the site of like permanent illegal immigration of people. El Paso being, you can make the argument that El Paso being a new Zion, being the site of a new Zion for illegal immigrants fleeing this permanent narco violence or MS-13 violence in Honduras or brutal sanctions in Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba, fleeing gang violence in Haiti, you can make the argument that El Paso is the site of a new Zion, the Zionization of the U.S.-Mexico border. And that is what I'm excited to see, at least in terms of breaking up this uniparty, this Zionist-occupied government uniparty, the Zog uniparty, between the Republicans and Democrats. And we don't really have a two-party system. We have this conglomerate of Republicans and Democrats who support this Zionization of the world. And we have the fringes of both who don't agree with each other on anything except this. Who accept it, that is something they both agree on, and a majority of the American people are rapidly starting to agree with as well, starting to wake up to the dangers, the fraud of Zionism and the Zionist lobbies in the United States who have control of American politicians. I mean, the Ukraine war now, not universally, but now a majority of Americans think we have either sent enough or too much aid to Ukraine, to the new Israel. We now have the majority consensus being that this the funding of permanent warfare, wherever it is, for whatever reasons, however you moralize it, must be opposed. That is an unshakable thorn in the side of the Zionist-occupied government that I find interesting. So that's two types of splits within the ruling class here in America that I'm curious to see the developments of. Do I think that the fringe wing of Democrats and the fringe wing of Republicans, do I think they're going to unify over this issue? No. And their job is to manufacture conflict to keep American people divided. Do I think the American people are slowly starting to unite over this false dichotomy between Republicans and Democrats in order to be the thrust of the spear that is anti-Zionism? I'm starting to see that trend. And I do believe that is a major force to be reckoned with in terms of weakening state power, in terms of growing people's power. I'm excited to see where this plays out. Yeah, I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter than I have in previous times. Got some people tuning in for longer than they ever have. We're starting to pick up speed, baby. So yeah, I thank everyone who tuned in, and I thank you for tuning in the future. Those who watch this stream after we close it out, getting a little bit bigger every day. Yeah, once again, make sure to follow me on Telegram and on Twitter. I put my Telegram in the chat. I didn't put my Twitter there. Twitter.com. Son. So follow me there as well. I'm gonna drop my my Telegram one more time in the chat. And if you want to follow me on TikTok, it's also at Hard Targets Intel. Though I might get taken off of TikTok because there are a bunch of blue-haired liberals on TikTok, and they are trying to shut me down. But that's okay. So let me know. Always feel free to reach out to me. What do you want to see me talk about on this channel? Until next time, this is Teray. You've been watching Hard Targets, and I appreciate y'all. That's all I got.